Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is the Assembly Legislative Committee. Today is Thursday, March 6th, 2025. We are noticed from 11:50 a.m. to 12:50 p.m. This is Chair Brawley. I'll be chairing today. We have Vice Chair Johnson, and then let's go around and do introductions in person and on the phone. Thanks.
Mark Littlefield. Zach Johnson.
Anna Brawley. And on the phone, we have Mr. Solt.
Randy Solt here.
And Mr. Myers.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And I also understand we are joined by our state lobbyist on the phone. We'll go to you guys in a minute. And then we also have Mr. Clauda from the mayor's office and members of the clerk's office and assembly council team. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to suggest, unless there's any objection, that we briefly flip order of business just to take up the update from our state lobbyist, and then we'll come back to our other business. So if there's any objection, I don't see any. Okay, so I think we're joined by Wendy Chamberlain and or Heather Brakes. So we'll turn it over to you guys to give a brief update.
Thank you very much, Assembly members. Today in Juneau, we saw the legislature have its first struggle. They went to put education bill on the floor. It was on the floor. The minority filibustered. They ended up adjourning in a very contentious incident. So we expect to see education back on the floor Monday. I just heard there's 68 amendments to the bill. So it's going to be a difficult session. The bill currently has brought the increase back down to $1,000 in the BSA. It does have some of the governor's requests in there. So perhaps this will move through, although it will be probably pared down in the Senate. Actually, to be honest with you, they're not getting anywhere because they have one member, Representative Dilbert, who has been in hospital, came back down to Juneau, is still feeling the effects of her hospitalization and is very, very limited. She was on the floor today to give that 21st vote that they need, but then she's back home again. So until they have a solid 21, it's difficult for the House to move. I will tell you that they are closing out the subcommittee budgets. A big thank you to Representative Josephson. He chaired the Hess Committee or Hess Committee budget and brought forth $13.7 million increase for behavioral health providers. A lot of the providers, as you know, were no longer taking Medicaid patients and were shutting their doors because of reimbursement rates. So this will allow bridge funding for the next 2 years until a new rate methodology study is done, which is supposed to be done next year, and it'll get back the rates back up again. So that's good news. Along with that, Senator Dunbar has his parity bill. So I think the issue on behavioral health will be taken care of, provided the Senate passes the bill. Moving over to what's in the budget, basically it's a status quo budget. We're struggling with education, although I do expect that to pass here in the next month at some level, go to the governor. And then I think taxes are definitely on the table. There's given the revenue picture, given the funding left over in the CBR, which is $3 billion they need for a safety net, they are looking at taxes. The majority has put out oil taxes. The governor's response has been that can be part of the solution, but not all the solution. He had previously put out a sales tax. That doesn't seem to be getting a lot of love. So moving forward, I think they're, especially in the House, wondering how they move forward. They will get there, but I think we're going to see a special session. And at the end of the day, a lot of Anchorage requests for funding will be on hold until we figure out our revenue picture, whether we're going to impose revenue measures, whether we're going to have status quo, what we're going to do. It's undecided at this time.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll also note we were joined a few minutes ago by Mr. Constant. So I'll just see if folks have any questions. I don't see any in the room. I'm just checking. Okay, I don't see any online as well. Folks on the phone, you can text me or just speak up if I'm not seeing it. So I don't think there's any questions at this time. I guess, Wendy, just the one question I have is in terms of process. When do you expect the full operating budget to, roughly speaking, to get to the finance committee and then the House?
It'll probably get to the Finance Committee next week. I expect it to be there the end of next week and then public hearing over the weekend. That's what I expect. Of course, all of that depends on how many days they are on the floor to try and do education, but it will be within the next week to 8 or 9 days.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not seeing any other questions, so thanks for the update. I know it's busy down there, so we can let you go, or feel free to stay on the phone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well then we'll roll briefly back up to unfinished business. These are our standing items. So, and then of course we have our other kind of specifics below. But I wanted to come back to the federal legislation and policy piece just to give Mr. Clouda a few minutes to share the CDS or congressionally directed spending request that the Muni has put in. And we have a handout for that. So I'll turn over to Nolan briefly, and then we'll go back to the rest of our agenda.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Nolan Clouda with the Mayor's Office. So last Friday, the 28th, we had, or by last Friday, the 28th, we had submitted about 15 total congressionally directed spending requests. There is a limit of 5 per organization, but enterprises and utilities are allowed to count as separate organizations. So we had 5 submissions from AWU and then a few other, and then one from ACDA that counted kind of separately, and then 4 from the kind of MOA itself as a unit, which was for AFD for firefighter decontamination equipment, a geospatial tool set for the Office of Emergency Management, the waste to energy project, the design and permitting components for that, and APD's emergency vehicle ops course also. So those were requests we're feeling very hopeful about. Went through a lengthy process of soliciting ideas, getting feedback from Senator Murkowski's office. They were very helpful in kind of sussing out, what's a competitive proposal and what isn't. So we focused on making sure that we were putting forth good stuff that was likely to get support. And also that aligned with Muni priorities and that we had match funding for. So that's the update on that process. We look forward to keeping the body apprised if we get any announcements about any kind of funding decisions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. I noticed in here a request for $2 million for APD patrol vehicles. We're also contemplating, the special levy that'll be on the ballot. Is the thought that, like, let's say if we got both, we would just purchase more cars sooner, or do you think that if this is granted, we would not use the levy tool as much? How are you guys envisioning that holistically?
Through the chair to Member Johnson, that one is actually one that was approved. There was a process where they were approved last year. Several CDS requests were approved last year, and then didn't get funding in the appropriations bill, where the senator backed them and wanted to get them in, and then they didn't, and so they were being resubmitted, and they didn't count against our limit. That vehicle purchase was one of them. It's a pretty modest one for $2 million. The fleet need, I think, is greater than what the levies are going to bring in, at least in 1 year. So the additional funding for the levies, for the vehicles, as I understand it, would be something that would be able to be put to very good use.
Okay, so it would just help us get caught up faster, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, yeah, and as we know, it's like state budget requests. Hopefully we see the funds come through. And I know the Congress is still working on the budget reconciliation for this year and then for next year as well. So, okay, any other things that we want to cover on federal? Okay, not seeing any, and I think there's a couple other things we can talk about later. So then I think we'll move to, unless there's other things people want to bring up under unfinished business. I don't think there are any from last meeting. So let's move on to new business. So we already did our lobbyist update. We can share a brief kind of recap from the AML legislative fly-in and recap of our visits. That was a couple weeks ago in February. So I'll actually first turn it to Mr. Clouda, and then I can add anything else as well. Just if there's any kind of things you'd like to share from that.
And sorry, in which context?
Sorry, from the AML visit a couple weeks ago, the conference and then the visits.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we met with 12 legislative offices during that visit. We were talking about some of our capital requests in CAPSIS and also the port project, how we have a request in CAPSIS for about $50 million. That's kind of a placeholder request in the event of a geo bond or some other kind of opportunity, but it's largely passive until something like that becomes an opportunity. So we had to kind of socialize that. It was primarily Member Brawley and Member Rivera and I attending meetings, and we felt like good, successful visits, brought home several kind of small follow-ups, and think considered it pretty successful. Also, we're getting a good read of the landscape in Juneau as far as this fiscal situation.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just briefly add as well, I think, of course, AML, they had a really good set of sessions. We weren't able to attend all of them because of other meetings scheduled, but we heard from, or the group heard from legislative leadership at the state level, discussed a lot of other priorities, answered some questions about the budget. And so that was a really great opportunity for all of the local governments who attended to be part of that. So I'll also just say at this point, we don't have another visit planned to Juneau, or at least not from the assembly side for this session. We kind of got our budget requests in there and talked about priorities early. We had our meeting with the delegation. So just to say, there may be other MOA folks participating in meetings or hearings, but that's where we are right now. So any other questions or comments on that? Not seeing any right now. Okay, well, let's move on. So the next item, just very briefly, is the NLC, or National League of Cities. So there's one update, which is some members are traveling there in the next week to meet with, to participate in that conference. So that's local governments, really cities from all over the United States come together. The policy conference that is held in DC is really about talking about federal legislation and priorities, meeting with Congress people, doing a fly-in, and then just having a chance to connect about, what's happening in other cities. So the other thing, just to briefly note, I was recently appointed to the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources EENR committee. It's one of their federal advocacy committees. And essentially it's elected officials from all over the United States. That particular committee deals with, obviously with energy, with environment, but also deals with water and sewer infrastructure and a lot of the other kind of topics that the municipality cares about, as well as the state. And so I'll be sharing back what I learned there, and then making sure that we're sharing what Anchorage is doing, and all of those other pieces. So I think that's all I had to share with that. So those meetings are part of the conference as well. And Mr. Costa has a comment.
I question whether this is the proper committee for that report. And so I think that it probably is a better fit for the Enterprise Utilities Infrastructure Oversight Committee. And so I think that it's fine to tell folks what you were doing, but I think if you're going to do meaningful ongoing reports, the proper venue is probably that committee, because that's what's germane to those topics. Just a suggestion.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I think just to share, my understanding of that is the committees work on a set of really policy platforms, and then that's one of several committees. There's other ones dealing with community health, all of these other pieces, and so those all roll up into what NLC as a whole takes positions on behalf of local government. So, but yeah, in terms of kind of specific updates, that's something I can consult with the co-chair from the committee. Yeah. So, okay, but that's just really the update. So then that appointment goes through 2025. And so just also to note for those who are interested in getting involved in NLC, any member can attend the conferences. And we have 2 appointed members. It's myself and Mr. Constant currently, but that can also change over time, obviously. So just as something to keep an eye on if you're interested in engaging at the national level. Okay, I don't see any other comments or questions on that. So briefly then moving on, the Anchorage Delegation Town Hall. This is really just a notice, and this is information that we've heard from our legislative folks. So as we all know, they host an event every year to hear from the public. I think they also give brief updates, but it's really more a chance for the public to speak. At least it's been in the past. And so like they did last year, it will be held at UAA campus, but it will be a little bit later than last year. not during spring break. It'll be Saturday, April 5th. And so I don't have a specific time. I think it's probably going to be in the afternoon. That's usually when they are. And of course, we'll circulate that information as soon as we get it. But we want to make sure that our folks know that if you're interested in speaking with legislators, that's a great place to show up. And I don't think there's probably any questions or comments on that. That's just information. So then let's move on to our last substantive item, updates and discussion on active legislative bills. And so first I will point us to the legislative tracking document. So this is this is an update of just what we shared the last couple meetings. We've got a relatively short list of bills that either we are actively engaged in because we've taken a position, or they align with one of our legislative priorities, or things like the budget. We just know that that affects all, us in some way. So we have that list there. And then we've been trying to keep it updated as best we can. And then there's also a list of other bills, which are ones that either folks have brought up or possibly have some impact on the municipality or some department or some function of ours, but not necessarily one that we are actively engaged on. So I know we were joined by Ms. Ross. I'll just ask briefly. I know you're just back from being on leave as well. But if you have any specific updates or you want to call anything out, and I'll just note in the beginning we heard an update from our lobbyist about HB 69 education funding. We know that's going to continue to be a thing. So other than that, I think. Thanks.
The election bills we've been tracking and having communications with, I believe Rep. Schrage and Senator Wielkowski's offices. I don't think we have anything new to report. It seems like the things that we want might not make it into the bills because they're focused on bigger things. So not quite sure where we stand with that. And then I think that's the only one that we're tracking that we've seen movement on. One other side project we've been working on is getting a letter of support from the Anchorage delegation for our HUD funding request for Anchorage to get more for HUD to update their formula so that Anchorage and Alaska get a more fair proportion of the funding. And so Representative Mears and Senator Kaufman's office have been working to get signatures from everyone in the Alaska delegation for a letter that our team can take to DC next week.
Okay, yeah, thank you for mentioning that as well. That's a good connect from our state to federal to local. Any questions or comments from members? Okay, Mr. Cloud, go ahead.
And to piggyback off of Ms. Ross's comment about the HUD and the continuum of care funding, we did mention that Senator Sullivan met with us in the mayor's office on Friday, and that was one of the topics we discussed. And he was hopeful that the new HUD secretary that we would be able to make headway on that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. And that is a topic that we're going to continue to carry when we go to DC as well. Just making sure all of our offices are up to date on that. The one other brief thing I'll mention, just because I saw it in here, I know Senate Bill 47 regarding land management and Chugach State Park easements. I think I saw it on the Senate calendar. Either it already passed or it was going. Mr. Cloud had an update on that one.
Yes, SB 47 to allow easements, state park to grant easements to municipalities through the DNR commissioner. That one we've worked closely with Senator Giesel's office to, on the language that's used. So it added some language to give it a stronger consent that not just that the DNR commissioner can hand over, easements to us, but also that we have to accept them. So we don't inadvertently take on cost barriers, or just cost burdens. So we worked with their office closely on that. That did pass Senate resources on Friday.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know it was going to get scheduled soon, but I haven't tracked that closely, and thanks for the clarification. That one also, I think, just to note for folks who are interested in the Chugach Access Service Area, obviously it's a separate but related issue because it is dealing with increasing access or the feasibility of being able to do improvements on or near the park. So that's great. Okay, any other questions or comments on specific bills? Not seeing any. So then let's move on then to, and I should just say too, if there is a bill that you know is moving or you're interested in that is not on this list, we are certainly happy to add it. It doesn't mean that we are spending all of our time looking at all these things, but keeping the list is helpful. And this list will persist into next session in 2026. So it'll be helpful for next year as well. So lastly, let's move on to a draft resolution from Member Voland. It looks like it has been submitted to the agenda, I believe. And so this is a resolution in support of Senate Bill 8, which is a bill from Senator Gray Jackson. There's a sponsor statement on the second page dealing with education requirements or accommodations for folks who are deaf or hearing impaired. And so I know Mr. Voland is not here at the moment. I think that the resolution is pretty self-explanatory. I guess I'll just ask either Mr. Clouder or Ms. Ross if you have any information you want to share on this. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I guess I'll just say this is one of multiple education kind of policy bills that we briefly took a look at, decided not to put all of them on the list because there was a lot of them, generally speaking, for tracking. But I know this one is of interest, and certainly I believe some of their funding was discussed in the school district's bill. I think it was restored, but I'm not sure. So just seeing if any members have comments, questions, concerns, anything you'd like to share about this resolution or the bill. I don't see any online at the moment. Okay, I see folks taking a look at the paper, but not jumping up with questions or comments. So, yeah, so I think not much else to say here since the resolution sponsor isn't here, but we will look forward to seeing this on the meeting of the 18th, and then just encourage you to read over the sponsor statement or look at the bill if you have questions. Okay, well, I think we have gotten through the bulk of our agenda, so I will just see if there's any other questions, comments, items people would like to raise before we sign off. I don't see any from folks on the phone, so I think with that, then we can call this a brief meeting. I don't see anybody in the back for audience participation, so I think with that, we can say that we're adjourned. All right, so thank you, everybody.